What's going on, guys? Reisshub back with another video in the How to VOD Review series. This is part 3, which will cover the early game. If you're watching this video on the day of release, I'm doing a DreamHack viewing party, and I'm also going to be doing live VOD reviewing of it. Come and join me if you want to learn something and just generally hang out too. So the first thing to cover in the early game is where to drop. With the current map, it's really difficult to find somewhere that's uncontested to drop and actually is able to give you good loot. So I feel like the majority of players aren't actually dropping on these scavenger routes, and instead they're landing at POIs, and if they don't want to fight, they're just taking the area of this, getting the loot there, and then disengaging. Like I said, it's difficult to be uncontested, so this is why it's really important that you know how to fight off spawn at your chosen drop spot. This video isn't particularly about which drop spot to choose, but it's going to give you a bunch of tips on once you've chosen one, how to dominate that spot. Nearly all the examples I'll be using in here will be from trios, but all of this information also works in solos, duos, squads, trios, wherever the game mode is. All of this information is still applicable. So once you've chosen a drop that you're relatively comfortable with, the first thing you're going to need to look at is drop height. Ensuring that you have the best possible drop is so important when you're contested. There are two different methodologies that you can do to use this. Firstly is trying to get as low as possible and ensuring that you are the first person to land, so you can ensure that you get that chest or floor spawn, whatever it is, first. This is really good if you're contested by a large amount of people and you know you're going to have to fight immediately off spawn. If it's a drop like Catty Corner, for example, that's very 50-50 and it's very dependent on getting a weapon first, this kind of method is absolutely perfect. Whatever drop spot you're at, you should learn exactly where the best place is for you to deploy your shield at to get you that lowest drop. I'm going to do in a couple of videos covering some of the best ways to drop in some specific POIs and areas in the future, but wherever you're dropping, you need to ensure that you know how to get the best drop there. All it takes is 10-15 minutes of you going into arena or in pubs over and over again and just trying to nail exactly where it is to drop to ensure that you get that first chest. So the second alternative is when you're not heavily contested and you want to ensure that you have a safe landing. For this, you want to actually do the complete opposite, and that's you want to stay a little bit higher and watch where everyone else is dropping. This will allow you to find a spot that's free that you can then land on and get the guaranteed loot that's in there safely, and then continue playing in your early game from there on. This is really great if you are trying to land uncontested on a poverty route and you have multiple options planned out for where you can go, as you can just wait and see which one's free and then land there. So once you've chosen an area to drop, let's take a POI for example, like Retail Row. Where you land in your POI is going to be really important. Obviously you want to ensure that you land on the places that have the most loot in this small area, such as Doghouse for example on Retail, as there's 3 chests in here and 1 outside on the bus. There's also a lot of floor loot and ammo spawns here too. No matter the game mode, you really need to ensure that you are controlling the largest amount of chests and loot throughout this drop. So again, let's look at Retail as an example in trios. So if you have 1 player land on Doghouse, 1 on the very north building of Blacktops, and 1 at the far in the back, opposed to the other team who lands at Residential area, the team who lands on the Blacktops and Doghouse has a significant loot advantage over the other team. This means that when they fight, the chances are your team who's landed on the east side here is going to have the significant advantage in the fight, meaning that you're already going to be on the upper foot, making the fight significantly easier already. No matter where you choose to drop, no matter what game type it is, solos or trios, ensure that you're trying to get as much loot as possible as early on and control a large amount of the POI and loot path to give yourself the advantage over the other team or players who land there. I kind of hinted at this in the previous topic, but ensuring that you have a really efficient looting path is also so essential to ensure that you can get moving quickly. Because in this meta, you're going to be contested a lot of spawn, you're going to ensure that you need the essentials to be able to fight. That is a shotgun, most importantly, shields, and plenty of mats, preferably also some sort of rifle or SMG too. The majority of the time, you're probably going to want to disengage and continue to loot if you don't have any of these things there. Obviously, each game is individual and each situation is different, but this is a little rule that I like to make to myself, because if you often push without a shotgun, you're not going to do very well. On this looting path, you also need to ensure that you know where the high yield materials are. In the early game, this is the chance for you to get your hard materials. A lot of the time, especially with good players around, they're going to have already harvested a lot of the brick and the metal from the looting paths, so ensuring that you know where the high yield materials are in your drop spot for brick and metal is super important. So overall, you need to ensure that you have a really efficient looting path in the early game that gets you as good loot as possible as fast as possible. This will set you up with an advantage to fight if you need to, or disengage early to ensure you get a better rotate also. So really that's the majority of the principles you need to know if you're uncontested. Know your loot path, get it as efficient as possible, loot all the hard materials early, and then rotate as early as you can to ensure you have the best chance of rotating into a center position later on in the zones. But obviously, being uncontested off spawn isn't something that most people struggle with. So how do you fight off spawn? Well, what's most important as always is advantage, disadvantage. This is something that you can really easily predict in the early game. As I said earlier, if you have greater control over more chests and better area of the map, including some high ground areas, particularly something like a roof, it's going to be clear that you're going to have an advantage over them with more loot, more materials, more shield, and better positioning. So this really is the time where you want to take that fight and be super aggressive when you know you have that advantage. Similarly, when you know you have the disadvantage, this might be a time to decide to, okay, let's disengage from this because we know we're going to die here. Or, just like any other fight, you can try to find a way to turn it in your favor and get the advantage. This could be being sneaky and sneaking around into a better position and getting a good pinch, therefore you can get a good beam off on your opponents, giving you the health advantage. Then while you're healing up, you can take height, and this will also give you position advantage as well. You don't necessarily just have to do this with a pinch and long range JR shots. In the early game, right hand peeks are super valuable, because often players are just continuing to loot. They're trying to be cautious to be aware of you, but if you're holding a really good angle, they're going to have no idea that you're there. You can really turn a fight in your favor just by getting a little quick beam off on someone when they don't know where you are. So what do you do once you both engage in a fight and there's no clear advantage or disadvantage? Well, at this point, you just have to treat it like a normal fight. However, you have to be extra cautious of two specific things. The first here is your materials. Obviously, because it's early game, chances are you're not going to have the opportunity to harvest as many materials as you would in the mid game, which, like I said earlier, is why it's so important that you ensure you harvest immediately as soon as you land, because you're going to need enough materials to fight. On top of this, obviously I'm a huge advocate of never 50-50ing really unless you absolutely have to, and in the early game it's particularly important that you do not 50-50 fight your opponent. This is because you almost definitely don't have enough heals to be able to actually heal yourself back up if you both get damaged, which means you're going to be running around with no shield trying to fight and with little mats, and it's a very easy way to get yourself eliminated. All of this little chip damage adds up, so any little shot you take, a 20 tag, a 30 tag here and there, really adds up in the early game because most people don't have enough heals to continually heal themselves up. Hope you guys enjoyed that video and learned a lot. If you're here on the day of upload, head over to my Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/Reisshub, because I'm going to be doing a viewing party of DreamHack. I'm also just going to be doing some live VOD review on it as well. It's going to be chilled out, it's going to be fun. Hopefully we can all learn something. Hope you guys have a good day, and I'll catch you later. See you!